Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX consultancy. Check us out for projects, training, and consulting. And this is episode 159. Stuck? Diagrams help. And we're going to be welcoming Abby Covert here in just a moment, but I want to give you a couple of quick show notes. First of all, Abby was here before. She was here in episode 102. So if you fall in platonic love with her as much as I have, go and check episode 102. You can find it on YouTube by searching for Delta CX 102, and you will smash right into that one. Also, a quick thanks, as always, to the people who are donating to the channel financially by clicking join on the YouTube channel. People are giving $3 to $10 per month to keep me in chocolate chips and streaming software. So thanks to everybody who's giving to the channel. Totally optional. Always appreciated. And what else can I tell you other than I realized that because Abby was here on episode 102 and we premiered our new theme song on episode 108, that she hadn't heard the theme song before. So forgot to tell her that. All right, so let's bring in Abby. And of course, if you have information architecture questions, ask them as we get to know Abby. Madalena says, did someone say diagrams?
Someone did.
We will be. So Abby, first tell us all about you.
Well, my name is Abby Covert. I am an information architect and an author. I work and live in Melbourne, Florida, and I just wrote my second book, which is called Stuck, Diagrams Help. And I had not heard that wonderful theme song before, Debbie, and I really did mean to make a comment on that. So I'm glad that you did first, because she was like, it's just like the last time you're there. And then she hit play on this like amazing theme song with glitter explosion at the end. And I'm like, what? I did not see this before. So I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming back, and I will never get tired of that song. I had one of my favorite musicians on the planet write it for us, and paid him, of course. So first of all, tell everybody how they can find you, get in touch with you. Are you a tweeter, a LinkedIner, website? I hear you have an Etsy store.
I do. I have an Etsy shop, so you can look that up. It's Abby the IA is my name on there. And then abbycovert.com has pretty much anything you'd want to find about me. I'm not much of a social media person at this point. I have a toddler, so I don't know how people can do both. But you can find me on all of the social things. And when big things happen, I do tend to message out. I also have started a mailing list. So if you're interested in sort of following along with my process, I send only one email a month, and that is a hard promise to both myself and my audience. So
And,
I would
this
love
is
to
one
see
of
you on
the
that list.
I'm on it. This is one of the few lists I am on. So everybody join Abby's list.
Thank you, Debbie.
And also let's remind everybody that Abby's first book, which we do recommend on this channel from time to time, is How to Make Sense of Any Mess. And so tell us about the new book and what drove you to write it.
Yeah, so actually, we could start with the first book because that's really the impetus for the second. In How to Make Sense of Any Mess, which is a beginner's guide to information architecture, I did some test reads midway through writing the book. And the feedback that I got from readers was that they really liked that I had taken this approach to remove medium requirements for talking about information architecture. Like it wasn't information architecture for a specific thing, it was just generally applied. But they needed more examples. And they were like, we just need more examples. And so I ended up figuring that diagrams were some of the most perfect examples of information architecture that you can grasp quickly and that become really useful to everyday people who are trying to implement IA principles into their life. So I proposed these 10 common diagram types in How to Make Sense of Any Mess. And over the years, they have become fondly known by my readers as the pizza diagrams because they are all about the topic of pizza. And what I've heard from people over time is, this is great. I think this is so awesome. I have no idea how to make these things. And to me, I'm an information architect. I learned all these things on the job. It sort of all has collected over time. So I took for granted entirely that you couldn't just show a picture of a diagram to someone and expect them to make one by applying their own context. And I very quickly, in teaching through my first book, realized that that was the case. So I sort of like jumped to creating curriculum for my grad students about diagramming. And I had a really rich curriculum around it. But then, life goes and gets in the way and things happen and things get dusty. So when I left my last full-time role, I was looking for my next project and I stumbled on this bingo card that I had made for my graduate students. And it was a diagram critiquing bingo card. It was basically 25 things that are probably wrong with your diagram and you just haven't figured it out yet. And I told my husband that I was going to write a short book about that bingo card. And well, what ended up happening is much different. I now have a very long book that is about diagrams. And yeah, I'm really happy with kind of where it took me. I did not expect to end up spending 18 months on it. But here we are. So yeah, the book is called Stuck. The name and the context of how I'm thinking about diagrams very much came out of writing the book. So if any of my test readers are watching this, they might remember that this book used to be called The Purpose, Process, and Craft of Diagramming. And I was told by two editors that it was very dry, but it took a lot of kind of, I don't know, soul searching and trying to figure out like what is the thing that this is going to hang together on. And this amazing acronym kind of developed out of my process, and that's where we got stuck.
Excellent, excellent. So we said the word diagram a few times. So let's talk about what is and isn't a diagram.
Yes. So I will refer to the cover of the book, which defines diagram. It is a
Aha.
visual representation that helps someone, even if that someone is you. So this is answering both questions, right? Because it's saying what is a diagram, but it's also saying what is not a diagram. So things that might look like diagrams, like they have boxes, they have arrows, they have words, they connect things together, might not actually make any sense or be helpful to anyone at all. And I think most people have seen infographics or chart junk or whatever that fall into that category. Or many of us, especially in the UX profession, have been given these templates and to kind of fill in that don't feel helpful. And those also, I don't think, can qualify for the way that I'm thinking about diagrams and wanting to teach them as a skill for other people to use. So yeah, I've determined that there are two criteria. Is it visually represented? Does it help someone? And the really important footnote there is you can be that someone. It is okay if the diagram only helps you. But that's something that I feel people actually need to be reminded of. So I'm
It
happy to do
reminds
that.
me of a graphic, perhaps diagram, that we often roll out on this show, which I apologize will partially cover you. Is it meaningful? Is it actionable? Is it helpful? These are some of the
Oh my
criteria
goodness.
we often. Yeah, we're
That was
that's
like a
some.
helmet. I was trying to keep up with it as you moved it.
Yes, it's well, we could turn it into a game, whack a mole. Yeah, so that's interesting. So if it's not a diagram, if it's not visual, and if it's not helping someone, and
Someone.
helping, do we have any like? Is that a broad definition, or did you end up narrowing that?
Yeah, so helpful really comes back to that acronym that became the title of the book, Stuck. So, what are the superpowers that diagrams provide for us? And it comes down to, I think, five basic things. It's about stability, transparency, understanding, clarity, and kindness. And if you look at the use cases of diagrams in terms of how they are helping folks, it is, in my experience, generally providing one of those, or many of those superpowers.
Got it. Got it. So your own diagramming process probably evolved even while writing the book. So, can you tell us a little bit about maybe where you started with diagramming and maybe where you feel like you've ended up?
Yeah, I definitely came to diagramming accidentally, and then found out that I was sort of like born into it, which is a little bit weird. My grandfather was, from all accounts that I can tell, but not by job title, he was an information architect, and he worked for the military, and later he worked on Wall Street. And his job was helping large organizations to go from paper to punch cards. And he gave these flip chart presentations, and they had these really simple cartoons and visualizations that were meant to help the executive audience that was very much new to the whole technology efficiency play that he was a part of selling. And so when he passed, I inherited his entire portfolio because everybody thinks of me as being very much like him. I'm a writer. He was a writer. I'm a drawer. He was a cartooner. And so I got his things, and it was through looking at those portfolios that I realized, like, oh my gosh, I didn't like learn diagramming when I was a teenager and then like follow it through my education. Like this was always a part of what my grandpa did. Like he had journals for all of his home projects, and they had little little diagrams, a lot of schematics in his case, because he was like a builder. So he liked to build things and make schematics of what they would look like. But also flows and Gants and all of these things that I became very familiar with only through my corporate exposure to user experience and information architecture practice. So it was sort of over time of practicing those things that I picked up the tools. I remember the very first like UX diagramming thing that I learned from was Jesse James Garrett's visual vocabulary back in, 2002 or three. And kind of after that, I just became obsessed. Like, I just think it's such an interesting way to think about problems. And it's such an interesting way to present problems to other people and to work on problems with other people. So yeah, I've been kind of like adding to my tool belt over, the last 2 decades working. And then the last decade of that, I've also been kind of put in the hard position of having to make that stuff clear enough to teach to other people. And writing this book, actually, I think made me really define what my diagramming process is, because I never thought that I had one. It always felt very much like painting to me. But what I realized in this is that even painting has a process, and there are things that you do before other things. So I've really tried hard to establish a process for diagramming that other people can follow, if only for the process of learning it so that you can decide on your own process later on. And that diagram also ended up on the back of the book. So that's the process of diagramming.
How to diagram the process of diagramming. It's getting meta
Getting very
here.
meta.
Yeah,
Getting meta again.
Facebook unrelated. And Udipta says, that's one of the biggest home libraries I've seen.
Oh my gosh, it wraps all the way around the room. So this is only 1/4 of it is the message back. Yeah. I love this room. This room is the reason I bought this house, was this room. It was built by another author. And actually here, which way do I go to? Yeah, see this pencil sharpener? Wait, where is it?
Oh, next to the horse? No.
There we go. How do you move your arm to be mirrored?
Opposite.
There we go. Right there on the wall.
Oh yeah, the pencil sharpener.
Yeah.
That came with the house.
That is a pencil sharpener. That came with the house, and that's the reason we got the house, because I said, I'm an author and I would like to write my next book in that room. And if you could leave the pencil sharpener, I'd really appreciate it. And the person who was selling the house had inherited it from an author who had built it. And she was just touched that another author would want to work in the space that he had created to write his books in. So we got the house, and now I'm writing my books in a very, very good energy space, I would say, for writing. So,
yeah,
lovely.
That's beautiful, beautiful story. I don't even think I knew that. And I feel like I've seen that room a bunch of times. Wow. Okay. So, and then how about your own process for diagramming evolving? Like, while you were writing the book, did you hit a point where you were like, I'm getting this wrong, or like, this kind of stinks, or this isn't clear? Yeah. How did you work through your own process?
Yeah, I would say that when I got to the part where I knew that I needed to define good in terms of diagrams, I immediately hit a challenge point. I realized that I was not being efficient in the things that I had learned to teach other people about diagramming when it came to my own work. So simple things like starting place, right? Like, starting place is one of the simplest tricks that I can teach you right now about diagrams. If you start your diagram in the middle of the page, you're going to be in a world of hurt later on, unless of course you're making something that's meant to like spiral from the center out. But in a lot of cases, when you do that, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And it wasn't until I had to sort of like nail down some of the things that could be true most of the time enough to say like, yeah, that's a principle, that I could look back at my old work and say like, oh my gosh, what was I like? I just tried so hard to make that work and it just wasn't working. Like, one of the very first diagrams that I ever had real success with at work had a super big flaw. And every single person that I met with told me about this flaw. And I didn't change the thing. And it was because it was fine. It was working. Everybody got it. But they all told me that it was rotated the wrong direction. And I just refused to change it because, So you learn these things over time, that you're like, that extra little bit of cognitive load that I introduced with those people wasn't actually worth it. Like, I probably should have just made the change after I heard it from the first person, because I knew it was true. But, you kind of start to fall in love with your diagrams. So I definitely learned a lot about the process of remaining iterative, kind of how long it really takes before you should be deciding the template that you're using, if you're using one at all. And then how much revision there is in the cycle of making sure that it's good. because the messy diagram that you make for yourself can satisfy the requirement of being a diagram. Like, that's fine if you are the only person it's meant to help. But if you're planning on taking that to another person and it could be cleaned up to reduce that cognitive load for them, you kind of really have to start asking yourself the question of, like, what are you losing by not making that choice and doing that work for them? And I think in a lot of cases, that is where diagrams fall down. So yeah, my process has been very much like admitting what I have known for a really long time, but have not been consistent in implementing at all.
It makes me think of a diagram that I saw recently. One of the low ego action heroes from our Slack community showed me something she was working on, and I really loved the content, but there was something about the way the diagram was laid out just seemed backwards to me. And it was, I don't know the names of different diagrams, but it was almost like a mind map type of diagram or hierarchic diagram where she had things, and then they had sub things, and then they had sub things, but even though we have a left to right language, she had put it right to left, where, like,
Ooh,
as you went
yeah.
deeper into the weeds and details of something, you were going right to left. And there was just something about that for my brain that was just
Yeah.
soup. Is that just me, or is that, like,
No.
am I the weirdo who couldn't read the diagram correctly?
Well, no, you're
Sure.
not. You're not the weirdo. Reading direction absolutely is a thing that you need to pay attention to when diagramming. But I would say that just like any other thing in diagramming, it is much more art than science. So it is just one of the many decisions that you have to make. Like, I'll give you an example with starting direction and reading direction. Um, if you think about a hiking trail in a park, right? You're looking at your position in a random forest that you have no position on otherwise, right? They can't control where on that map you are starting from the standpoint of trying to find yourself, nor can they control the reading direction of it, really, because it's dictated by the ecology. So what they would do in that case is they would over accentuate the starting place so that you could quickly and efficiently find it, and then they would add additional visual cues to the reading direction if there was one to be had. Like, if you had to traverse it in a certain direction, which many hiking paths are, they would make sure that that was heavily reinforced in the diagram. And the reason would be because people would not necessarily pick up on those things otherwise, because of wanting to have those defaults. So you're absolutely right that if you are an English speaker, an English thinker, you are very likely to want to read from left to right. There are many other languages that operate that same way. And that's just the case. The same thing goes from top to bottom. I mean, but top to bottom is an interesting one too. Like, once you move a top to bottom diagram onto a web browser and it's big enough to have to scroll, you might not have the same decision. There's an example of the book of a career timeline that on the diagram, you kind of think of that as a ladder where the beginning of your career is at the bottom and the, kind of like penultimate of your career is at the top. Well, if you're scrolling it on a website and trying to look at it as a journey, you actually have to architect the diagram exactly the opposite. So context has everything to do with deciding kind of what the reading direction is, what the starting place is, and all of it has to come down to, like, each of these is an individual decision that you're making. The problem comes in when we're not making the decision consciously. We're just sort of like, well, because it fits is the reason that it starts that way, or because it goes that direction. And that is often the place where people do get confused when they look at our messy diagrams.
I'm going to read you a couple of the comments that have come up. I don't know if you saw them
Cool.
coming up on the screen.
Oh, I can't possibly. I only have one really good eye, so it's very hard
Oh,
for me to see. Like, I see things blipping, but there's not going to
things
be
are
anything other than
blipping.
that for me.
Yeah, okay. So I'll tell you, Solomon wrote, wait, isn't she the author of How to Make Sense of Any Mess? Oh my God, big fan. I got my manager to get that
Oh,
also. So yes, it
thank
really
you.
is. Yes, the Abby Covert. Now, we did get a question from Heath through LinkedIn, and I know it might not be a relevant topic to what we're talking about today, so you can always pass on this one if you want, and we can go back to diagrams. But Heath is asking if you have any thoughts on object-oriented UX.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Sophia's work. Yeah, I think that object-oriented UX is very close in nature to taking the core principles of information architecture and content strategy and applying them to user interfaces. I think it's a really interesting framework. And I think, yeah, she's invested probably about a decade now into that work. I think I run into a lot of people that have been really changed by it. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for it.
Ah, okay. Sorry. Thought it might be off in some other corner. That's cool. Okay, so let's see. So I made a note here, and I wanted to ask you. I think when a lot of people think about information architecture or start learning about it, they think, oh, information architecture, that's flows and navigations and sitemaps. So I just have to be good at those diagrams. And I
Mm.
guess, what might be your advice, especially to that more information architecture newbie who's wondering, how many diagrams do I have to learn or do or understand?
Ooh, such a good question.
Oh, thank you.
So first of all, I think it's really important that we admit that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of diagrams. Many of them are duplications in all but name. And so there's a lot of kind of messy language in the world of diagrams. There's also a really real historical perspective on exactly why that is, that kind of hooks it into the main promise of diagrams. Like, they are so helpful that so many people have developed them from so many contexts that we just haven't really had like a significant come together around it and gone like, hey, how many types are there, and like what are the names, and what should they be, and how should they work, and what makes one good. So spoiler alert, that is the book that I just wrote, is trying to do exactly that. But when we get into the question of like, well, how many of these templates do I have to become well versed in, I think the better question is, what concepts do I have to teach you before you are comfortable diagramming without determining a template first? Because there are challenges that when we get into our UX process, there are challenges that feel like repeatable magic. And we can know, this feels so similar to a challenge that I solved with a journey map, that I'm going to whip out that file and I'm going to save as, and
Save
I'm going to do my
as.
research, and I'm just going to do this thing, right? Like, why would I make it more complicated? But in a lot of cases, that is not the first thing that you should be doing. The first thing that you should be doing is really looking at, what is the intention of the thing that I am trying to make? How is this diagram going to help that thing be made? What is the audience for this particular diagram that I am making? And do I even know what I'm diagramming, like, for myself before I try to diagram it for other people? And I find that people try to make one diagram that does like all of that, and it doesn't work. Like, that never seems to take off. So what you end up having is like diagrams that are really complicated that people kind of hand wave at, or like diagrams that your manager goes like, ooh, can I take a screenshot of that? And then they make it like this big on an executive slide, and they say, look at how smart our people are. None of that is really at the heart of what diagramming can actually provide to you. And I find that if you can learn the vernacular of diagrams, the sort of grammar of how to put together shapes and labels and lines to make things clear for other people, you can do a lot more than what the templates allude to. And for all you might make something that's so unique and different that we decide to call it your name diagram, like, woo, Mr. Venn, you got the first overlapping circles. Like, no, he didn't. He's just the first person that got it in print, like, so the best diagram template is the one that you haven't made yet for the project that you're doing right now. So do that one.
This is making me think that, and by the way, everybody, we're live. If you've got questions, I see over 30 people joining us live. So if you've got questions, please ask them. I'm monitoring LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter for questions. So please ask them, and I'll shoot them over to Abby. This makes me think about, and this may rub some people the wrong way, and I apologize, but it makes me think of some of the portfolios that I've seen from some of the up-and-coming UXers who have gone through some of the boot camps or the Google course. And I can't tell you how many times I see, and then I made a sitemap and it's a flow diagram. Or then I made a user flow and it's a sitemap diagram. And I'm starting to think, next time I see that, I'm going to say, here's a book you might want to buy and read. It's a book about diagrams. Do you think a book like this can help some people who might have some confusion over some of these common diagrams? I haven't read the book yet. I'm sorry. So I'm asking questions that, like, what's in there? I don't know. I didn't read it.
Yeah. I tried very, very hard, but the Postal Service is not participating in my scheme to get Debbie this book quickly. So apologies that she's not
everything
ready
is
yet,
on the slow boat to Italy. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So in the book, one of the things that I have tried to do is I did decide that templates have a role in education, right? And I'm thinking about them as similar to the role that recipes have in learning to cook. It's sort of like when you first learn to cook, you are grasping at that recipe for dear life. Like you are between the lines of that thing, like there are smudges on it, all the things, right? But after you have a couple of years cooking, no longer is that the case. Like now, when you decide to make something, you're maybe looking at several recipes and deciding, like, well, I don't really want to do that, or maybe I prefer this ingredient instead of that, or I don't really want to go through that trouble, so I'm going to do it easier this way. So I think diagrams are actually really similar. So I included templates in the book. There are the 10 for the common diagrams that are in my first book, as well as 2 bonus diagrams that I have found use in the 8 years since. And one of the things I provided to help kind of get to that, which one do you use, is I made a flow chart to decide which one you should use based on what questions you're stuck on right now. So if you're stuck on things that are about time in nature, you're probably going to be better served by something like a Gantt or a flow. But if you're trying to, say, visualize an arrangement, you're probably going to do better with a hierarchy or a schematic. So I think that there's some little tricks that I've learned that I'm hoping that I can teach to people about, when do you decide which one to use? But also, I think it's really interesting, Debbie, that the examples that you used, for me as a teacher, are something I encourage. Like if you are using a hierarchy map to make something and all of a sudden there's a moment where you're like, man, it'd be really great if this was actually a flow. Like I've done that. I've done that. You've done that. Like we've all done that. When you have a solid template that's doing what you need it to do, and then you need to bring in another piece from a different kind of template. Once you're confident in that vernacular, you can do things like that. It's like swapping out walnuts in your pesto. You know that once you know how to cook, right? You learn, oh, no, it's pine nuts. It's definitely pine nuts. No, kids. Walnuts too. So I think that there's a
here
real...
in Italy, it's cashews.
Yeah. There you go. See? Oh, I love Italy.
If you go cheap. I also want to just mention quickly, someone wrote in the chat, like, how did I not know this show was happening? I want to remind everybody that all the links related to the show, deltacx.com/links. You'll learn, I've got an event calendar there. Never be confused or surprised by what our shows are. There's a Google Calendar there with every show that's coming up, as well as other live events. So please add that to your Google Calendar and let Delta CX follow you around wherever you go. So you too can know that these are happening. Remember, people ask questions. I think people are just so surprised to see you. I also wanted to ask you about diagrams being actionable. Sometimes people create something and, like even Larry Marine teaches his task analysis, which I think you've seen some of our task analysis work. I know, Larry Marine. Hearts, hold on. Hearts. Larry Marine.
Larry Marine.
Yeah. The Larry Marine fan club.
Such a good researcher.
Co-president.
So
thank you. Oh God, I'm so lucky to work with him. When I first saw his task analysis kind of diagram, I was like, I'm not sure the client's going to get that. And he was like, it's not for them.
Exactly.
And so it's meant to be actionable for one group and maybe just informative for another group. Do you have any advice on, at least if we're thinking actionable, how do we make a document more actionable? Or how can we get a hint when we've made, I said document, but how can we get a hint when we've made a diagram that isn't actionable?
Well, I think that you're going to be very familiar with my answer because you probably give it 1 billion D times a day.
Hold on, let me try.
To test.
Okay, I was going to put up it depends, but okay.
No, I wasn't going to put that. I was going to say you have to test with your users, kids.
Yeah.
Like you have to test diagrams with your users. I think that that's something that I don't see enough people talking about. I see a lot of diagrams get shined up for showtime, and it's the sort of like shock and awe, big reveal, look at my big map, now give me feedback on it immediately, which never actually works. I think that like from an actionability standpoint, we have to come back to the process of diagramming, having a heavy focus on both your intention and your audience. And it really gets down to defining that secondary piece of the definition of diagram, like helpful to someone. You have to define both of those. You have to define what does it mean to be helpful in the context that I'm in, and who is the someone that I am trying to be helpful to. In the case of, Larry Marine's diagrams, I think that there's a very different use case between him and other researchers or designers or other, close collaborators that he's working on, using that diagram kind of as a map to the territory that they're exploring deeply together, versus a zoomed out view of that diagram being used to say, we are capable executive stakeholders. We are capable and we have the tools to do what we're doing. Both are sort of diagrams in that they are helpful, but those are being used as very different audiences. And the second one, that falls a little bit closer to the looks like a diagram, but because it is meant to serve a purpose, like if it was shown to an executive stakeholder and then they were supposed to know something about that, so now we can solve all of your customer centricity issues because you've seen our fancy diagram. Then it's not a diagram. Then it's an abusive use of zoomed out screenshotting, which happens all the time, So I think when it comes to actionability, it really is it's that intersection of what is the intention, who is the audience, and that really depends on understanding your context and sort of how far you are on that.
Yeah, and we had a question come up from a friend of the show, Madalena, who said, what is your take on pie charts? As in, I have talked to people who wouldn't do a pie chart even if their life depends on it.
Well, I think that pie is delicious.
Yes.
I think that numerical representation is always manipulation, and that you have to be very careful about the manipulation techniques that you use and the effect that has on your audience and your intention. So I will not join the club that says I will never make a pie chart as long as my life depends on it. I've made a few pie charts in my time. I think they have a use here and there. I don't find them to be all that valuable, but I'm also not willing to throw any graphical representation out of the running to be helpful, because I think that maybe it could be.
Yeah. Oh, Benjamin says, I might be one of those anti-pie chart people. All right, we're going to have...
And that's fine, Benjamin. I respect your choice to never use a pie. I respect it very much.
No pie for you.
We all have to make a choice for ourselves. No pie for you, more pie for me.
I'll take it.
Now we're talking about the pie you eat, right? Because I really like pie. Pie's delicious.
Pie sounds good right now. Damn it, no pies in this house. Okay, so I want to talk about, again, what could be controversial. You might be like, Deb, new topic. But I recently saw one of those jobs to be done job maps. Have you ever seen those diagrams? I should have had one ready and put it on the screen.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the jobs to be done framework. I'm searching my mental index of do I know exactly what their diagrams look like? Probably not. Okay. I'm guessing that it's, a lot of boxes.
No, you'd be surprised. So it was a giant wheel cut into 1 million almost pie pieces. And so it had a concentric nature to it, but it also had a pie piece nature to it. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to read it clockwise or counterclockwise. And then there were different parts of the wheel that represented different personas or segments. I saw it the other day for the first time because I'm not much of a jobs to be done person. I'm more of a task analysis person, but I was like, holy cats, I wonder if this is meaningful, actionable, helpful. I didn't know if you had seen it or.
I think that's one of the hardest parts, right? I mean, that's true of any information architecture. It's we don't know if it's any good. I mean, I don't know if you, Debbie Levitt, are the audience for that diagram, or if their intention was to reach you and to cause such rage. I don't think so. That probably wasn't their intention.
Yeah.
Yes. Sadness and rage. I think that I hope when I see diagrams like that the makers of them got something out of it, even if the something out of it was just checking the box to say that they visualized it because they had to for some reason. But I would say that one of the warning signs that I would take out of that story is if your intention is to visualize something, back away slowly because you're setting yourself up. The intention, in my experience, has to be bigger than that. It has to be more than just making a picture of it. If it is only making a picture of it, you will never quite be able to satisfy that because it will always already be done. It's like, well, I visualized it. There you go. Squiggle, squiggle, done. It's just not a very good litmus. So I think
Jason,
with all those canvases, I don't know without using them.
yeah, exactly. Jason asks, is it a sunburst chart? Not exactly. Jamie says, it looks like a Tibetan wheel of life.
Oh, see, now those are lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to look that up.
So
Hold on. Tibetan wheel of life. Does it look like the Tibetan wheel of life? No, that's lovely.
so, yeah, I'm still in the dark here. I'm not going to open a browser because then we'll just go down a rabbit hole. I think you guys you're tempting me. You're tempting me to go down the rabbit hole.
I might try to put it up on the screen if I can get it quickly and easily. I might try to put it up on the screen.
Let's do it. Live diagram critique. Let's see how many of the bingo principles it violates. You guys want to?
Oh my God, this sounds fun. So I'll work on getting it ready, but meanwhile, I'll ask you another question that came up on the screen. And Ekta, friend of the show, asks, could you give an example of where you'd use the same info in one type of diagram for one audience and the same info in another type of diagram for a different audience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can do that. And I can point you at a case study about it too. I did a project for Nike where I was responsible for being the first person to map a very, very long process of researching, developing, manufacturing, marketing, and distributing their products, which is end-to-end a 96-week process. So I was the very first person that ever made a picture of it end-to-end. And the pictures that I was required to make of it had to serve a lot of purposes. And I figured that out pretty quickly. There was the purpose of the engineering and design team that was building software to service that process. And that was really the impetus for the diagram being made, was like, everybody's cool with the process, not having a real like, hey, we know what that is, until you have to like build software to enable it. And then everybody's like, we should probably draw a picture of what that process looks like so that we know how to do that. So we had like the very detailed arrangement of a very detailed flow map of all of the roles and distinctions for people and deliverables that go through this rather intense 96-week process. And it was, I mean, it wrapped around an entire room in Portland. Like it was a tool. Like teams went there to do their sprint planning, and they would figure out where in the flow they were working that week. And then they were pinning ideas to it through research and doing the whole thing over years, right? So that diagram has like a very distinct purpose. But in the time frame where we were working on that diagram, one of the things we had to do was continue to sell the idea that this diagram needed to be made at the granularity that we were making it. Well, that required us to actually show the executives what this process looked like, but in a way that would scare them enough that they would continue to let us do our job. I'll just be totally real with it. So that's what we did. So I made a very simple Gantt chart that was like, hey, this is a 96-week process. Ta-da! And they were all like, see, not so hard, 96-week process. But then I asked them, how many simultaneous 96-week processes is a given team at Nike working on at any given one time? And none of them could answer me. So then I went to my next slide, which was all of the Gantt charts stacked on top of each other to show them exactly what that would look like. So it very quickly was able to give them a simple representation of a 96-week process they've never seen before, so that they could start to become conversational in like the main phases of it and like how we were thinking about the labeling and that kind of thing. But it also gave them the actionability of feeling like, okay, yeah, no, she really does need to be down in all those rabbit holes, talking to all those people, getting all those details in that war room that we keep sending her to. And so, yeah, I think that answers that question, hopefully.
Yeah, I like it. And Matti says, numerical representation is always manipulation. I'm so going to put this into my quotes repo.
I would love it. In the book, there's actually a principle called manipulated appropriately. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, I've got the book for you.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to try to pull this thing up on the screen. I hope you're able to see the screen. Let's see if this is correct. Hold on. So this should be, okay, you and me. And this is from
I gotta move you to a bigger screen. Hold on, I'm gonna move you to a bigger screen so I can actually like use my eyes here. Okay.
This is from the Medium article from Tony Ulwick, who wrote one of the many books on jobs to be done. So I'm just picking on him specifically because I think this is his version of the diagram. It's got, you know, his company name in the middle of it, so I think of it as his. It is the wheel within a wheel within a wheel. You know, feel free to karaoke some Journey on this one. Abby, what do you make of this diagram? Let's say somebody puts this in front of you and says, hey, we have mapped jobs to be done. Here you go.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna need this book. So I have 25 things that are probably potentially wrong with this diagram.
Okay.
Let's go through a few.
Please.
Are there contrast ratio issues here? Yes, absolutely there are. I would say that the gray and that white, definitely a contrast ratio issue. So it doesn't have much to do with the construction of the diagram, but there are surely people that cannot read the gray parts of this diagram. So that's worth noting.
Okay.
Let's see. Unclear time scale. Yeah, I have no idea how this relates to time, if it does at all. The fact that it's circular makes me want to relate it to time, so I think that's worth noting. Unclear logic or reading direction. Check.
Yes,
Tone
into
doesn't-
out, left
yeah.
to right, out to
Yeah,
in.
I mean, oh my goodness. No, the graphic designer in me is also kind of crying because the lines segmenting other lines. Tony, by the way, I'm very sorry about this. This was not planned, but it is very
Right.
fun. So if you want to like chat about this later, let me know. Tone doesn't match the intention. I mean, I don't even know what this is supposed to be, so I'm not sure that the tone, or I don't know what the tone or the intention is. Tidiness. Is it tidy? I mean, I don't know. To be honest with you, the overuse of hyphened words as labels when they're that short really bothers me. Like that just says you don't have room for your labels, which makes me question why you're using that layout for what you're trying to lay out. Unneeded use of line jumps, no. Inappropriate manipulation of data. I don't understand how the things in terms of the quantity of these is calculated. So I would say the manipulation is unclear. Like, are these supposed to be a percentage? Because they are being represented as if they maybe are, but I don't know.
Right. They seem like pie pieces.
Yeah. Unclear starting place. Yeah. Unclear audience. Yeah. Encoding lacks a backup. So this is a big one. This does not have a key. I have no clue what purple, gold, gray, and black mean, but I want them to mean something. And that is not me. That is humans. Human beings want differences to mean things. That is a very well cited fact. So encoding lacks a backup. Well, we don't have encoding to begin with, so we're not having backup. Baseline or edge directions are reversed. No, he did a nice job of that. He didn't like rotate the text to be unreadable.
Okay.
Data is too precise. Nah. Too much information. Maybe.
A little bit.
Icons lack labels.
No icons.
Too much cognitive load. Too much cognitive load for the value delivered. I might call on this one. I'm not sure what the value is meant to be, but it seems a little heavy. Not accessible to the intended audience. We'd have to check if it has alt text or is explained in some other way down below. Data's not
by the way,
precise enough.
his caption of this picture is job types.
Job type. Okay, so maybe not. Data is not precise enough. I don't know. Too little information? Yes. Ineffective use of visual embellishment? No, I think that's fine. Labels are too long? No. Unclear encoding? No. Ineffective or lack of branding? No, he put the brand on there. Not the right information? Maybe. Unclear or ineffective typographic hierarchy? I would call this on that because I'm not sure if these bigger chunks are also, like, they're all the same type size, so that's a little bit, that's a lost opportunity, I would say. And then line length or line spacing issues is the last one. So yeah, I think Tony has some improvements he could do, but here's another thing that I want to say. If this diagram is working well for Tony's purposes, for his intention, for the audience that he's looking to reach,
if it's helpful to his audience,
then exactly, who am I to say that this doesn't work? You know, maybe they're in a culture in which deep purple and gray, and gold and black means something. That could be a thing. That could mean something. So, but I don't know what that is. So.
I think another thing that confused me, and I don't know which thing from your evaluation model this would be, but like I feel like there's a bunch of different unrelated things being put in the same diagram. Like one is core functional jobs, and then something else is consumption chain jobs, and then something else is purchase decision maker and financial metrics. I didn't even think we had. Well, what does metrics have to do with this? Related jobs, which sounds like miscellaneous, and emotional jobs, which is meaningless to me. me.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a bunch of unrelated things being diagrammed together. I also don't know why the gold goes right to the middle, but the gray doesn't go right to the middle.
Same. Same. Like, what is the? I'm gonna go ahead and call it. The information architecture of this diagram is weak. It's weak sauce. It's weak sauce. We don't. Tony,
Cry.
come here. Let us have
Yes.
a talk.
It's the come to Abby talk. A friend of the show, Rob Solomon, is writing, this diagram teardown is giving me life, and I just bought both books. How did I not read the first one before now? So, Abby, you are selling books this hour. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks for letting me give you an impromptu weirdo diagram discussion. You know, we don't mean to
That was super
specifically
fun.
poop on this person, but we're talking about diagrams. And this was just one I saw the other day because I want to mention it in the book I'm writing. And I was like, I don't even know what to say about this diagram because I'm not sure I understand it.
Hey, I'm all about trying to spread the art of better diagramming. I think a lot of people were not taught this skill. And I think, like, if I had to project into Tony's situation, that diagram probably helped him work out some stuff. And I think it's really common to think that something that helped you to work out some stuff will help other people to work out some stuff. And the difference between those two things is the value of user research, right? Like, that is the difference, is like taking it as it comes from your brain to the page and going like, yeah, people will love that. It's so often a recipe for disaster. So Tony, reach out, let's have a chat.
Yeah, and this is
talk.
the jobs to be done framework. We've got a job that you need done,
I have a job,
sir. Yes.
Be done. Yes, your diagrams.
We have someone who can do the job, sir. And Jason says, it feels like a misappropriation.
Oh,
yeah, it feels like a misappropriation of a commonly abused chart or diagram, which seems common.
Yes, it does. It does feel like that. And it's like, if you're going to borrow a template and try to make it your own, at least stay true to the kind of basics of that template. Like in the case of, like, he was borrowing a pi or maybe a radial. I don't even know what he was doing.
Yeah, it's like concentric plus pi.
But then he didn't give any sense that the spatial part of it meant anything. And so that, yeah.
Right. And that brings me to another diagram that I love to tear down. I won't name names, though if you're a frequent listener here, you'll know what I mean. There are some of these things that you'll often see as canvases. And very often there's canvases with boxes on them, and they've got numbers because you're supposed to do the canvas in the order of the numbers. Abby, why on this green earth are these canvases boxes never in the number orders? Why is the canvas page, and I could pull one up if you want to go there.
No, you don't have to.
Everybody knows which one I'm going to pull up. I won't do it, but it's always like 1, 7, 3, 5, 4, 6. And I'm like, holy cats, like, why?
Yeah.
And this is a UX
I think I know
diagram?
why.
Yeah, do you know why? Because I don't.
I do. Yeah, I do know why. I mean, I think I know why. I can project a why onto that.
Please.
I think it has to do with that when you're using a canvas, it is a built-in assumption that you are using it in a context of facilitation. And it is not always the case that the visual representation of the thing that you want to come out of it is in the same hierarchy as the way that you want to talk about it. So for example, as a facilitator, one thing that I like to do is put all like little sunshine and rose conversations right up front. So everybody's like, we're getting all those out of the way and we're going to get to the darker shit later. If I had a diagram that was supposed to come out of this, that I was using this canvas to capture things, I might want that canvas to resemble more that diagram's end result than the course of the conversation. And so I could see many canvases being evolved as visual representations of conversations after they happen, but the facilitation of them kind of popping you around to make a better arc of how you would get people to actually talk about those things. That is my projected reasoning. Although it could just be like people like to hunt and peck and confuse people and just like want to obfuscate meaning. I don't know. It could be that.
Right, I guess like the CX UX information architect visual hierarchy person inside of me says, okay, cool, but then why not end up with a really digestible, meaningful, actionable, helpful diagram that is so clear to everybody in the room and say, wow, we
Yeah.
facilitated that meeting or workshop and here's this output
Yeah.
or artifact and woo. And then when I look at it, it's like box 1, box 7, box 3, and it's
Yeah.
like, I don't need a
Mhm.
children's, I don't need the game of Operation. Like, I don't need this so
It is a little
strange.
bit like that. Yeah, it is a little bit like that. Yeah. Hmm.
Or one of those
Yeah.
weird games we had as kids. Hey, everybody, remember we've got just a few minutes left with Abby. It's already winding down the show time. So if you've got any last questions about diagrams, information architecture, or the world of Abby, please ask that now. Yes, because she's here live. If you are watching the video later and you ask a question, I will do my best to answer it or track down Abby. So leave a question under the YouTube video and we'll see what we can do to help you out. Another reminder, of course, to everybody, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and tell some friends about it. Tell your managers, your coworkers, everybody, because we are still shadow banned and we need all the help we can get getting people to know about our channel. So please do spread the word. And don't forget our new Slack and our not new Slack and new Discord communities are completely free. We would love to see everybody there interacting, asking questions, answering questions, helping each other. So I don't see any new questions coming up yet. So while we wait to see if there's any last questions, I'm going to ask the question that you might not want to hear, which is, what's next for Abby?
Oh God. What's
I know
next for
some.
Abby? What's next for Abby is that I am working tirelessly on the ebook version of Stuck. I am very excited about it. It has been a bear of a creative project. I am trying to deliver on a fully accessible ebook, and that takes a tremendous amount of manual work. So, yeah, right now I'm mostly sitting at my desk for as many hours as I can take it, making changes to an ebook. And yeah, I'm starting to allow myself to dream about what the next project might be. I have a couple ideas, but nothing set in stone yet. I'm for now just really excited to teach people how to diagram. So yeah, I'm selling some workshops, doing some conference stuff, that kind of stuff.
Cool, cool. And we've got some thanks from the chat room. Wei Wei says, thank you, Debbie and Abby. I just found 2 new books
Thank
for
you.
reading. And John N.A. Brown, who's been on our show and is going to become a monthly guest because he's so fabulous, said, not a question, just want to thank you both for the session. Jason says, lovely to hear, Abby, as always. I have to go make dinner. Thank you both. Thanks for the details. Send us a diagram of the dinner.
Oh my goodness, please, please do.
Yeah, have you? I mean, what's a good way? Maybe this is an interesting question. What's a good way for people who feel a little bit new to diagrams to maybe practice?
Mm. So there's the exercise that I put at the end of chapter 1 is to make a diagram for the recipe for an omelet. And I think that if you could pick any recipe you want, but think really hard about if you needed to visualize this for another person to be helpful to them, how would you do it? Like just off the cuff from what you know about visual representation. I was very surprised to be confirmed in my belief that there's a lot of visual signals that we just all agree on. Like arrows going in a certain direction, we're going in that direction. Circles, they're going clockwise. Like there's just little things. And so I feel like having the opportunity to diagram without a lot of input first can really give you a sense of sort of where you're at. And then also just give yourself permission to use whatever tools make sense to you. So I find a lot of people like think they can't diagram unless they like get, like OmniGraffle or something really heavy that's all diagramming based. But in reality, like I think some of the best diagrams are made in PowerPoint or with paper and pens. So find a tool that will get out of your way and let you do what you want to do. And then find some fun, low stakes contexts that don't have anything to do with like your day job, something fun, like the process that your kid uses to get ready in the morning for school, or the handoffs of the car between you and your spouse over the weekend to get everything done, whatever it is. Like find a basic thing and diagram your way through it and see how it feels. And that'll give you a sense of if you want to keep pursuing it as a skill.
That's a cool idea. Thanks so much. Reminds me of the video series. I didn't watch all of it, of course, but it was like the dad who had his kids write out directions on how to make a peanut butter sandwich, and he would do exactly
Oh,
what they
brilliant.
said. Did you see that one?
I have not, but I can
Oh,
imagine that
okay.
that was hilarious.
Yeah, because he was trying to, I think he was trying to teach them to be detailed. So
Yeah.
they would say, like,
Well, yeah.
put the peanut butter on the bread. So he would take, like, a
Peanut
closed
butter
jar of
bread.
peanut butter and
Yeah.
put it on a piece of bread. And they'd be like,
Funny.
no.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
so stuff like that reminds me of that. Madalena's got a great question. That might be our great closing question. And she asks, what is
Great.
the best diagram you've seen lately?
Oh. Hmm. There's a couple of examples that I've used in a talk that I gave pretty recently that I'm really quite hung up on. I'm stuck on, if you will. There's one that's in a book called what was the name of the book? It's called Extra Bold, and it's a field guide for graphic designers that covers a lot of really important subject matter about ableism and systemic racism
I've
and
heard great things about that
gender
book.
inequality. Yeah, so there's a diagram in that book that I think the diagrammer's name is Akshita Chandra, and she made this diagram called oh gosh, I'm like I just had COVID last week and I'm like really brain dumpy. Like I'm just like all the things are just rushing through my brain. What is it called? The book is literally right there. I'm like, should I just go get it? The social something map or something like that. Um, I'll look it up after this and send it to you, Debbie, because it's a really beautiful piece of work, and I apologize that I can't recall it. But basically, what it did that I thought was really nice is it gave an illustrated approach to a really difficult subject matter. But the tone of it was very much about identification and not about change. Like it was just identifying the forces that are contributing to these factors and not about what you would need to do to change them. And I find that diagrams that can do that job are often like that first step that people really need to like know that there actually is a problem. So I would say some of my favorite diagrams tend to be the ones that are in that vein of identifying a problem, like getting people to see something that they couldn't see before. I think there's a lot of examples outside of that, but yeah, that's the one that comes straight to mind.
Yeah, and I've heard great things about the Extra Bold book.
The
I haven't
social
read it yet.
construction zone. It's called the social
Oh,
construction zone. Yeah.
okay. I was just Googling it and I saw a bunch of diagrams and I couldn't figure out which one it was. But yes, I did see social. So if you Google Extra Bold book map, social construction zone will come up
You'll definitely find it.
among
Yeah.
them. So yeah, that looked interesting. Okay, we're just about out of time. I hope we will have you back sometime in the future for more
I would love it.
information architecture or book adventures. Thanks to everybody who joined live and participated in our adventures today. And thanks, as always, to Abby. If you've enjoyed Abby, don't forget to get both of her books, How to Make Sense of Any Mess, as well as Stuck.
Promotion.
Yeah. Oh, other way. Yeah. Stuck? Question mark. Yes. Yes. Find her at abbycovert.com. Find her Etsy shop at Abby the IA. And Abby, where else can people find you?
I'm all over the internet. I'm not there very often, but I am findable there. So leave me a note. I'll find it at some point, and it'll be fun.
Excellent, excellent. So then I'll play us out of here, and I will catch everybody super early. Friday's show is being moved way earlier. Check the schedule, everybody. I've got a calendar. Check deltacx.com/links. Check the event calendar. Friday's show has to be moved earlier because it is the lovely Pierre Mario's birthday. So thanks again, and Abby, keep feeling better, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are